The joint forces advance in Hodeidah and secure new areas in the city. The government forces take fierce clashes with Houthi rebels in Ma'rib. Yemeni children continue to pay the highest cost of the war. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news of me, Shazab Delbey. The joint forces have made important progress on the borders between Hais and Al-Jarahi in Hodeidah. The joint forces reported that they shelled artillery fires on Houthi militia in Hais, causing losses on them. In the same context, the joint forces shot down a Houthi drone in the same area. More on the story is within this report.
Hodeidah Governorate in the western coast of Yemen is a crucial hot point that will greatly decide the future of the country. Weeks after the repositioning of the joint forces in the southern parts of the governorate, the situation on the ground sees a balance shifting. The joint forces said it scored some gains on the borders between districts of Hais and Al-Jarahi south of Hodeidah. In addition, media sources said the joint forces strengthened their control over Wadi Saqam in Maqbana district, west of neighboring Taiz governorate. The repositioning of the joint forces drew rapid field success for them in their attempt to circulate Houthi militia from the southern parts of Hodeidah and Taiz. After gaining more areas from the militia, the joint forces are now clearing the liberated areas from the Houthi mines. The engineering teams are racing the time to remove the mines that were planted everywhere in the liberated areas. The teams expanded mine detection in new liberated areas to include citizens' homes, farms, schools, and all public facilities. The step comes after a discovery of mines inside a mosque in a village southwest of the city of Hais in Hodeidah. The team said Houthi militia turned Hais district into a land of minefields. As to the humanitarian situation, reports reveal that some 1,014 families, which make more than 7,000 people, were displaced from various parts in Hodeidah to Al-Khoukhah city further south. Recent developments in Hodeidah have caused the closure of major routes running from and to the city of Hodeidah. This closure, according to experts, could have dire humanitarian consequences on civilians who await the arrival of relief aids.
In a third crime committed by the Houthi militia within the past 72 hours against civilians in Taiz, a child was injured due to Houthi artillery shelling. The shelling targeted residential neighborhoods east of the city. According to local sources, the child was injured by shrapnel of a shell fired by the rebels on Al Askari neighborhood east of the city.
When Muhammad went out through the garbage, a mortar shell was dropped. The shell caused shrapnel that injured the child in all his body parts.
In Ma'rib, the government forces backed by the tribes broke a Houthi attack in the southern front of the governorate. According to military sources, the government forces engaged in violent confrontations against Houthi groups and inflicted heavy losses among them. The sources confirmed that the confrontations and artillery shelling by the government forces resulted in the killing and wounding of a number of Houthi militants. Two Al-Dala clashes between the joint forces and the rebels renewed in Batar sector. Military sources indicated that the two sides used medium and heavy weapons during the confrontations. The sources pointed out that the Houthi militia targeted homes of citizens in town of Al-Masharih, northwest of Al-Dala, after receiving severe shocks from the joint forces. The coalition in Yemen said it carried out 15 operations against the Houthi militia in Ma'rib and Al-Jawf during the past 24 hours. The statement of the coalition confirmed that these operations destroyed 12 military vehicles and killed 85 terrorist elements. The Houthi militia killed a teacher in Amran governorate in north of the country. The Yemeni Network for Rights and Freedoms said The terrorist Houthi militia killed the teacher, Sadiq Iyad, after demanding his salary in order to support his children. A Houthi leader expected the outbreak of a revolution against the Houthi militia. Dr. Ayman al-Houthi said that the people had reached a final opinion that they had been tampered with false promises, especially because of their continued suspension of employees' salaries. Al-Houthi added that ministers received their financial allocations in full, while employees have not been paid for over 4 years now. Children in Yemen seem to pay the highest cost of war. More on story is within this report.
Endless suffering of children after 7 years of brutal armed conflict. Millions of Yemeni children are victims of grave violations between forced healthy recruitment, school dropouts, and begging in the streets, in search of a livelihood amid wartime. In the past, children were witnessed to work as porters, guards, or paramedics, but now they take on more active roles such as carrying guns, manning checkpoints, and being trained as paid soldiers. The Republic of Yemen government has adopted the action plan to end and prevent the recruitment of children by the Yemeni armed forces. The government has implemented the Child Soldier Rehabilitation Program in Yemen to provide services to former child soldiers. Violations on education continue with the continuation of attacks on schools and the military use of them, impairing the rights of boys and girls to proper education, with more than 2 million children currently out of school in Yemen. With the staggering rise in incidents of denial of humanitarian access to children in the country, children are more vulnerable to poverty and starvation, so they start looking for jobs to help themselves and their families, or in some cases they go seek shelter in the streets and beg for money. Although the Republic of Yemen government participates in programs that address child labor and access to education, the scope of these programs is insufficient to fully address the extent of the problem, particularly in exploitation, child soldiering, and child labor. The atrocities and immense suffering endured by children in Yemen are the result of an armed conflict that will invariably leave in its wake a generation of Yemeni children scared for life. It is urgent for all parties to actively work towards a political solution of the conflict if they hope to save children from further harm. Boys and girls are the future of Yemen. Parties to conflict must protect them from use and abuse and start treating children as the precious asset they are.
The war in Yemen has impacted people not only physically but also mentally. Due to the atrocities they face on a daily basis, their mental health has been destroyed. More on story is within this report.
For over 6 years, Yemenis have continuously exposed to stress and harms, in addition to widespread economic insecurity, fractured social ties, poverty, absence of basic services, and government neglect. These intense suffering and the extensive trauma to which Yemenis are exposed risks causing high rates of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. A study was conducted on school children in Sana'a and found that 79% reported PTSD symptoms. Many children reported having nightmares and difficulty concentrating in class. Yemeni health experts reported a 40% increase in the suicide rate in Sana'a between 2014 and 2015, and an increase in psychiatric patients. In Yemen, where the average 25-year-old has already lived through 14 armed conflicts, an estimated 19.5% of the population suffers from mental disorders, most prevalently anxiety, depression, trauma, and schizophrenia. Children have been particularly affected. Studies have found that 55% of children are sad or depressed. 19% of children are always fearful. Despite the likely severity of the mental health crisis, health services in Yemen are minimal, and little action is being taken by the government or the international community to mitigate and respond to the clear risk. According to the WHO, more than half of all health facilities in Yemen have been closed or are only partially functioning. For a population of 28 million, there are only 40 psychiatrists and 4 specialized hospitals. Many Yemenis are unable to access mental health treatment when they first seek health care. Medication is scarce, and when available, it's highly expensive. Mental health services in Yemen are insufficient to provide psychological health services for children suffering from distress, as well as for women, teenagers, older persons, and those who are suffering from chronic conditions. Now, in the 7th year of the war, the crisis in Yemen is no longer headline news, but the conflict continues to have a devastating impact on people's well-being and on their mental health in particular. Living in a context of war means being exposed to constant stress for a long period of time. Armed conflict in Yemen has not only affected people's physical health, it has reduced their access to health care, education, and food. It restricts their freedom of movement and denies them the freedom to express themselves. This creates serious mental health disorders. Yemen needs a long-term comprehensive approach, including more services to address the looming mental health crisis. If overlooked, mental health issues can turn into chronic problems on a larger scale, resulting in a complete damaged and violent society, which will ruin the future of the whole country.
Coming next. Point Underline is a great attempt to revive culture and the arts in the time of war.
اضطرينا نحن نغادر من ذي وزحنا.
الله يستنقذكم يا محويتني، لا الله يستنقذ.
Welcome back. In Ebian, dozens of citizens marched in protest against the deterioration of services. The protest comes 24 hours after hundreds of people in Taz organized a funeral for a sack of flour after its value went up to 60,000 riyals. Protesters in Ebian accused the local executive council of corruption and raised banners expressing their suffering. Safer tanker still poses a great concern not only for Yemen but for the whole region. A recent study has found that a spill from this tanker could cause pollution in the entire area and harm people's health. More on story is within this report.
An abandoned oil tanker in the Red Sea containing 1.1 million barrels of oil is at risk of spilling and leaving millions of people in Yemen without water. The FCO Saifa was abandoned approximately 5 nautical miles off the coast of Yemen in 2015 due to the ongoing civil war in the country. The tanker is at risk of leaking due to the deterioration of its hull catching fire through the buildup of volatile gases or through a direct attack. Talks between Houthi rebels and the UN-recognized government of Yemen and the UN about the potential spill have stalled despite warnings. A recent study led by researchers at Stanford University School of Medicine used thousands of simulations to predict the impact an oil spill would have on public health. The researchers modeled the potential spill under a variety of weather conditions, taking into account past wind patterns, currents, sea temperature, salinity, and seasonal and daytime fluctuations in weather. This could exacerbate shortages of critical supplies and could disrupt 38% of Yemen's fuel needs, causing fuel prices to spike and risking the closure of hospitals. Clean water supply to millions of people would be threatened due to contamination of plants. All of Yemen's Red Sea fisheries would be at risk. Some 8.4 million people may not be able to access food aid in the event of a catastrophe, while all of Yemen's Red Sea fisheries would also be at risk. In the end, if Houthis' obstinance continues and the UN team of maintenance would not have access to this aid oil tanker, a disaster would threaten not only Yemen but the entire region.
In the time of war, talking about culture and arts could be considered a leisure, yet social initiatives to revive the arts always give hope for Yemen. More on story is within this report.
Since art reflects the culture of people and documents their civilization, it also has a close relationship and connection with life. And this is what appeared in the exhibition Point Under the Line that was set up by the Aden Again Foundation over a period of 3 days in the city of Aden, based on the reality of the lines that the community has lived and the points that led to these lines, as the collapse of the currency, the effects of the war and dehumanization. These were all titles for the launch of this exhibition.
This is the first exhibition for me. These are my paintings, which consist of 4 chains: the expatriate, the dehumanization, zombie in Yemeni, and the mask. My idea behind these chains is to increase awareness and highlight the problems in Yemen. As if I'm saying, if you don't see the reality, you can see it in these paintings. I hope that this gives an idea to people and change something in them, so they can change it in others.
The Point Under the Line exhibition is the first art exhibition to be held in Aden since the outbreak of the war. And it brings together the creativity of artists in general, designers and painters in particular, where they showcased with their participation and their artistic paintings the most wonderful images of creativity.
Since the first time I heard about this exhibition and the idea in general, I was very excited to join, as it's been a long time since we did something like this. It's very rare to see artistic exhibitions for digital drawings or collage. Most of the exhibitions we used to have was mainly for photography only. I feel that this type of art is very special and has to exist, and there has to have an exhibition like this from time to time.
Many ideas and visions that were presented in this exhibition and embodied by these paintings, bearing in their contents part of the concerns and issues of the homeland and the citizen, in addition to highlighting heritage and historical monuments and calling for avoiding many negative phenomena in artistic images that were approved.
In this exhibition, we honestly saw a lot of hopes and fascinating things in it, which are outside the box and unexpected. There are things which discuss national issues and others discuss artistic things or childhood and their mental behavior affected by the war.
The designs reflect the reality. There are lots of other ideas addressed, like the high cost of living, which reflects the reality we live in. There are also bad social phenomena like chewing, tumble, and gossiping.
Returning art to life and working to revitalize it is a step worthy of attention and follow-up, especially in light of a bitter reality. Recreation and dusting off the fine arts has become an urgent need in a time of war and trading with the pain and needs of citizens.
The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 8 new cases of the COVID-19 in 2 governorates. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,995, including 1,949 deaths and 6,873 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The joint forces advance in Hodeidah and secure new areas in the city. The government forces take fierce clashes with Houthi rebels in Ma'rib. Yemeni children paid the highest cost of the war. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.